Hi there. I'm Bonnie Walters from Emmanuel Community United Methodist Church, and it's my privilege today to read to you from Once Upon a Bible Time, written by Janet Ray, a member of our church. Today's story is Surprised on the Journey. Are you ready? Evie made faces at herself on the computer screen. "Where is Grandpa? What's taking him so long?" she wondered. Just then, another rectangle appeared, and there was Grandpa's face with Theo, his cat, who seemed to be walking across the computer keyboard. "Guess what?" Evie squealed. "You'll never guess what just happened." Grandpa held up one finger and looked down at his computer. Theo jumped down. Grandpa fiddled with the mouse. Finally, he spoke. "What's up, Evie? You're excited about something, I can see. You started speaking before I even had my audio connected, so you'll have to tell me again." Grandpa was smiling. "We just got back from a walk around the neighborhood, and guess who we saw?" Evie couldn't even wait for Grandpa to make one guess, so she continued. "My gym teacher, Miss Becker, and guess what?" Again, Evie continued before Grandpa could say a single word. "She's moved here. She lives around the block from us." Grandpa had heard about Miss Becker, the gym teacher at Evie's school. He knew she was a favorite because she was fair and loved to have fun with her students. "Well, that's exciting news, Evie. It's always fun to have a new neighbor, especially someone you already know and like." "But here's the funny thing, Grandpa. I didn't recognize Miss Becker at first. She was on the other side of the street wearing a hat and sunglasses, and I didn't know who she was. She said my name, but I didn't even know her then." Grandpa was curious. "What was it that made you finally recognize Miss Becker?" "Well, whenever we're playing a game, if someone's not sure they've done something right, you can look over at Miss Becker, and she makes a sign like this." Evie started moving her shoulders. Grandpa laughed. "I can't see what you're doing, Evie. The camera isn't low enough." Evie stood up. Her blue shirt filled the screen. Then her hands appeared, one on top of the other, and she moved each hand from the middle to either side. "Oh," Grandpa said, "that's a baseball sign. It means you're safe at the plate." "Well," Miss Becker said, "it's good to see you and your family, Evie." And then she did that with her arms right away. I knew who it was. There's lots of different ways to recognize people," said Grandpa. "Sometimes when I haven't seen someone for a long time, I don't know them right away. But then when they speak or smile or scratch their ear in a certain way, I know who they are." "Well, I felt silly that I didn't recognize Miss Becker right away," Evie confessed. "It's only natural when you weren't expecting to see her," Grandpa responded. "May I tell you a story?" "Yes, please." Once upon a Bible time, two disciples were traveling from Jerusalem to Emmaus. It was the very first Easter Sunday ever, but these two men were very sad. "That's funny," interrupted Evie. "I love Easter. It's such a happy time with flowers and chocolate and a new dress, and the church is always full of butterflies and flowers. Why would the men be sad?" "Well, they didn't know it was the first Easter. You know that Easter's the day we celebrate Jesus' resurrection back to life after he was killed 3 days earlier." "Yes," said Evie, thinking. "So maybe they were sad on Friday and Saturday, but shouldn't they have gotten happy on Sunday?" They didn't know yet about Jesus' resurrection. They thought he was still dead. So they left Jerusalem and the other disciples and began their journey to Emmaus. It was a long walk that would take about 2 hours, and because they were sad, they weren't walking very quickly. They were talking about how much they loved Jesus, how kind he had been to them and everyone they met, how he really seemed to understand who God is and to help them feel closer to God themselves, how he made every activity a time of praise and prayer, and how much they missed Jesus now that he was dead. While they walked, a man caught up to them, and the three started walking together. "You seem upset," said the stranger. "Is there anything I can do to help?" The two disciples sighed. "Our rabbi was killed 3 days ago. We miss him. We had hoped that he would be the Messiah, the one to save our people. But now we know that won't happen." "Are you sure about that?" asked the stranger. "Of course we are. We saw him die." The disciples were annoyed by the question. Then one said thoughtfully, "However, a strange thing happened just this morning. Some of the women in our group went to Jesus' tomb and found it empty. We don't know what's going on." "Oh," Evie interrupted, "I know. That's Easter. I've heard that story before." "Yes," said Grandpa, "that's the important part of Easter. But there's still more to the story. Remember, they're all still walking to Emmaus." Then the stranger said, "If you read the scriptures carefully, especially the scrolls of the prophets, you will see that all these things needed to happen. The Messiah had to suffer and die in order to save everyone in the world." They talked and talked until they reached Emmaus. "This is where we live," said one of the disciples. "It's getting late. Won't you please join us for dinner and spend the night?" They all went inside. The meal was ready. They sat down. The stranger picked up the loaf of bread and said a blessing. He broke the bread and gave them each a piece. Suddenly, the two disciples recognized the stranger. It was Jesus himself. And then Jesus disappeared. The disciples stared at each other. How had they not recognized Jesus right away? Even while he was speaking on the road, there was something familiar about his loving way. They jumped up and returned to Jerusalem. This time they walked quickly as they excitedly reminded each other of everything Jesus had said and done with them. They found the rest of Jesus' disciples and told them the whole story. "It's true, he really is alive." Then they explained how they recognized Jesus when he broke the bread. They were all amazed and very, very happy. "Do you know why I told you this story today, Evie?" asked Grandpa. "Because I didn't recognize Miss Becca right away, just like the disciples didn't recognize Jesus right away. That's part of the reason. It's true that sometimes we don't recognize someone when we're not expecting to see them. But there's another reason. Sometimes, even today, we can recognize people by actions more than by words. Even though they talked all afternoon, the disciples only knew it was Jesus when he did something familiar, breaking bread and serving them. When we see people serving others, we recognize Jesus there." "The helpers," said Evie. "That's right. We see Jesus when we see the helpers. And when you're a helper, Evie, when you show love, I see Jesus in you." "Do lots of people see Jesus in me?" Evie wanted to know. "Yes, my dear, I think they do. I think I'll go now and see if I can help Mom by playing with Eddie." "That's a good plan. Love you lots. Bye-bye." They waved and clicked off. The end. Thank you so much for listening.